think that's all for the neutrality and avoidance of self-disclosure. And this actually, especially if you have like some kind of sensitive topics, or if you feel like they are sensitive toward this, and you don't need them to hide information, so you need to get them to talk. So you can facilitate this by making by like easing up the situation by saying, or the environment by saying, I know, like, to show some respect, and that you admit it's kind of a difficult, or it might be difficult for you to talk about this, but how did you believe if actually if the participant got arrested by the government, and you needed to, it might be like traumatized experience for the participant. So that's why you need to know if the participant will need to is willing actually to talk about this or not. So and then you can ask some sort of questions in order to examine whether or not the how they came to this belief, and how actually they acted on this in regard in their relation with the government or other oppositional parties. So here I'm not gonna repeat what I said about the interviews. You need, like, for the focus groups as well, you need to have your guide. You need to have the same, like the first 3 or 4 slides, they are applicable to both like the interviews or the and the focus groups as well. So you need to have you need to be neutral, you need to have your own guide, you have to prepare a general questions, but the technique and the functionality is different for the function for the focus groups. So here it's what's focus groups, it's kind of, you get group of people of certain characteristics in order to you get some data out of their interaction. So the interaction between the members of the groups actually is very important in order to analyze, in order to get data, or in order to analyze, the data. So and you offer kind of some people might say it's kind of like a modified form of, it's a group interview, but it's technically different. Because it entails you are interested in the interaction, and the spontaneity and the interaction between groups are very important, and it offers more natural setting in order to get some data from the interaction of between the group members. So from the interaction between the group, the different individuals or different members of the group, you generate narrative data, and you need to balance this if you have if you assure or guarantee homogeneity or regarding the composition of the group, sometimes people feel more comfortable around people that they are they bear kind of similarity with, but it's not good. You cannot get data or different narratives from the interactions. So people might converge on some norms and values and beliefs. So that's why it depends on the topic under investigation. I'm going to explain this in some detail. So you have to balance between it depends on the topic, between homogeneity and heterogeneity, because it has more to do with the self-closure and the interaction and generating data between people. And then if you, for example, if you need to, in Chile, for example, hypothetically, back in the 80s, for example, when parties, got engaged in this self-criticism and self-revisions, and for example, you need to conduct, you're a researcher, you need to conduct, some focus groups. You need to organize, some focus groups in order to know how the after, the referendum, you need to get, the people that got engaged in these self-revisions or self-revision processes, and you need to have like to generate some data or narratives from their interactions. And then you got, some groups from different, streams or different trends from the left, and you have like, to balance out, the socialist and communist and like, different, ideological orientation, and then you get them to talk about the experience, about the interaction, how they formed, different groups, and then how they conducted, these intellectual and ideological revisions, and then how they decided, to form the political, to build the coalition, and why the communists, and here like the homogeneity and the heterogeneity, because the communists and some parts, or some currents of the leftists, they disagreed and they refused, to the leaders actually, they refused to participate in the negotiation process or in the coalition process. So you balance out, this homogeneity and heterogeneity with the composition, with regard to the composition of the focus group. And then from the interaction and the group dynamics, you generate, kind of data and narratives that the actually you get them from the different responses and the wide ranges of the responses you will get, and you play the interaction actually would activate, some forgotten details. So if you remember, if people like talked about they focus mainly on like the year before the plebiscite, and then like the other member reminded them about, different, or early trials about like coordination and cooperation, and how they actually formed, like different groups in order to negotiate, or to offer more assurance regarding, the social and economic rights, and how like the Christian Democrats as well offered, some assurance about, how they actually managed to revalue the democratic governance. And then people like this would encourage, people to talk more about their experience or their engagement, in these process. So it's more than like a group interview, as I mentioned. So it's more naturalistic, setting. You create, more cozy or natural environment in order to enable, these dynamics and these interactions, and to offer to guarantee some degree of spontaneity. So for the composition, it's usually from 6 to 8 participants, and this like because the interaction is very important in the dynamics. So you need like like a particular size in order to enable this to happen, like these interactions and group dynamics. So this would allow for the interaction that would actually help with the data with generating data. So again, here you have like again you actually conduct or you manage this in stages. So the first stage is like again introduction. So you need to put people at ease by building up a degree of familiarity, to make people like familiar with your research, with your personality, with your topic. So this is like very important in order to facilitate the dynamics or the interaction later. And then you can highlight or draw in different perspectives. So you need to, while introducing the topic, so don't focus on one because the group might the group members actually might represent different viewpoints. So you need to bring all to bring in all the different political viewpoints or perspectives in order to enable them in order to make sure that different opinions are you're you welcome kind of, or the interaction might entail different viewpoints, and to encourage people to speak freely about their different perspectives. And then you can make a comment on the group composition as well, like the educational background, or perhaps like geographical background, and to make people like familiar with each other as well. And handling, these kind of differences might help with the later stages as well, because you have different, perspectives, and different, people from different backgrounds. This is like very important for your research. Like you need like different people, like with different ideological orientation. They got together in order to make sure how they engaged in ideological revisions. So you need to assure, and then you can assure, confidentiality again here, the same thing here as well. And then after the introduction, you might have this opening topic. So you give them an introduction about your topic. So you need to investigate, you write a research on this successful experiment about building coalition after between different, opponents, or different actually previous enemies, the Christian Democrats and socialists. And then you conducted this interview in order to make sure how they actually engaged, in these the motives and the incentives, that led them to revise, their ideological orientations. Here you're definitely playing, more active role in the focus group than in the interviews. So here it's your responsibility actually to invite more thoughts, or to ask, more questions in order to explore more, or to gain more details. Like if they mention something about like different, small groups, they formed in order to have like to issue, some political statements, or to make, some political declarations. So you need to ask, why they formed this, and how they actually came to this, and why they for what purpose, they made this in the early 80s. And perhaps you might discover, how the Catholic Church actually, after they actually engaged in this, and then some sort of the church became like kind of vocal, and offered its space, for previous political parties to act, offered them some space, to organize, their effort in order to criticize Pinochet, and how this actually helped with the getting people together, or getting different, ideological viewpoints, or different opponents, in order to make more revisions, and to amend or to revise their political stand. And then you can highlight differences and benefits of having, the different viewpoints or contrasting views. And again, you practice active listening, and you hear, like, you have to, like, pay attention to this non-verbal cues. Like, the body language, and how, like, the eye contact, and this kind of non-verbal cues that would, like, signal offer that would offer, signals to the participants that you are actually engaging, or actively engaging in the discussion. Because here you are interested more in the data, or the dynamics and the interaction between the members of the group. So actually, the structure, is like to what extent you structured your question. It varies. It depends on how actually you structured the discussion. But generally speaking, you might have like from 8 to 12 questions in order to structure the discussion. So here you have, like, it's not unstructured. It's like you have to have a structure and allow for some space. You have like more. You have to be much more flexible here in order to allow for some questions, coming from the participants. the group members. And then, but you can have like from 8 to 12 questions in order to structure the discussions along, these themes or these topics. And the fewer, the better. It depends on like how depth, the breadth and depth, of the topics or the subtopics you need to cover. And then you can allow for from 5 to 10 minutes for each question. In order to allow to get like to balance between again the level of information or the depth level of the discussion, and allow again like the interaction, the spontaneity of the participants are very important in order to come up with this new you might come up with new issues from the interaction that would contribute to the explanatory evidence you need to get for your research. And then here you need to balance out between different you play active role by facilitating and moderating the discussion. So you need to promote or to encourage the group interaction, and to get like the group interaction between like people might talk more about themselves, so you need to balance between these like group individual or personal details and the group interaction. You care about some degree of personal details, but the interaction here is very important for your topic or your research. And then the inclusion, you have to make sure that you include everyone. So some people actually they don't feel comfortable around or they don't feel comfortable with like talking in groups. So that's why it's your role in order to facilitate or to make it easy for them to speak about or to speak out or to speak about their topic, and to speak their mind actually freely in order to, even if they hold like different viewpoint. And then you might have, again, like people might talk about, they might take the discussion to a different direction, and it's your role to steer the discussion back or the debate back toward the relevant issues or the relevant topic. And again, with the ending, with the closing, you need to reaffirm confidentiality and to reiterate, the purpose of your research. So the interaction is very important, and the interaction of the group actually it's a process. This kind of interaction, it takes like the interaction takes different forms and different stages in order to get to the group dynamics or the level of interaction you needed in order to generate data or to get more information and relevant information for your research topic. So again, like in the beginning, it doesn't need to follow, this kind of like ranking or order. So it might be circular, for example, and it might end, at some stage. But generally speaking, these are like the main elements of the group interaction. So in the beginning, like the forming thing, it's kind of at this stage, people like, or some members, they might have like some degree of anxiety or overstatement, and they might incline to confrontation or dismissing other ideas, like social, like a communist, for example. They might be like like overly like confrontational, or like they had like this kind of more aggressive towards the socialists, that they excluded them from the process, and they actually they had like this agreement, or they agreed to build a coalition with the Christian Democrats. So in the beginning, they might like they made this overstatement about how they feel like they actually accused them of like being like of betrayal or something like that. But actually, this might be like they get relaxed in the process of the conversation. So here, like, with the introduction, it's very important in order to give background information uh, about the participants and everything, and this you will build a common ground or a familiar ground for them all in order to converge on, or in order to have like a common goal about your the research topic, is how substantial the research topic is. So this is very important in order um, to make kind of reorientation. It's not about ideological or political fight. This is regarding to a specific purpose, like research topic or research purpose. And then after that, they might go through this storming thing. This kind of, they might get engaged in criticism and tension. So people might get tensed up about the existence of different ideological political parties or different ideological opposition. And you might have some individuals or members that they dominated the discussion, and others they were silent, and other individuals or members, they might take this defensive position. And this kind of intense interactions might end at later stages, but it's not necessarily to achieve an end. And then norming, people might get calmer in order to figure out some similarities and common ground between them, how communists actually they actually converged, or they found out some similarities with the left, with the socialist party, for example, that they might share the same social and economic policies, and how they actually committed some mistakes by radicalizing the political landscape during Allende. But this is not always positive, especially if you need to because sometimes people the communists, you don't know if they reach this norming stage. So it's very difficult for you to detect to what extent this mask their attitudes and diversity. So perhaps they did that for the sake of some sensitive issues were raised by the Christian Democrats. So that's why they decided to converge, or to have a common ground with the socialists. So you have to make sure that you have you have other questions in order to make sure that it's not for it doesn't hide or uncover some sort of diversity and different attitudes. And then performing, people got calmer, and they started to interact with each other in order to work together, in order to, with the synergy kind of, in order to achieve with the interaction is very important in order for you to achieve a depth or a deep insight into the research topic about the ideological revisions, and why communists actually, whether or not actually they conducted these kind of revisions, and how they achieve, how they perceive this, and to what extent they perceive this as beneficial step. And then adjourning, so it's it's an end of the group discussion. And again, it doesn't need to follow this kind of it's not a linear progression of the process. So you can move forward without the norming. After storming, people might perform without reaching this stage, and it might take this circular form, that the dynamics actually would revert back from performing to storming again. While interacting with each other, they might have more intensive and critical attitudes towards each other. So it depends on the topic, and it depends on the participants as well. So here, as I mentioned, you play more active role in the process. So you have to balance, the needs between being like facilitator or moderator. To moderate a discussion, by definition, it involves kind of restraining. So you actually you restrain the discussion, and sometimes you have like to assume, this position of the presiding over the group, kind of. And then the facilitator, you by definition, you facilitate, the interaction or the discussion by like, lubricating or making it, easy, how to encourage people to get into, the interaction, or to enable, to facilitate, these group dynamics and group interactions. So it depends on your skills in order to stimulate, the discussions, and when you stimulate the discussions, and when you restrain the discussions, and how when people like, or when participants, bring up some irrelevant issues, for example. This is very rare in the focus groups, but just in case, you need to steer back to the right directions. And then you have to make sure you adopt, inclusionary approach. You have like this inclusionary attitude in order to prevent, any domineering attitude from you as a researcher, and from, any group member. So in all stages, or like all the way through, you have to have like, more kind of verbal presence by questioning, exploring, and drawing out, or probing. So you are there all the time. Perhaps when they perform, you can have like a feedback in order to enable them, interacting, in order to observe the dynamics that would generate, narratives and useful data for your research. So it's kind of a combination between like, assertiveness, and like, facilitation, or flexibility. And again, I need to go back to this, like, because sometimes, the group dynamics would converge on, like people would adopt, some or would conform to like the social norms, and this would hide again, some sort of diversity and different attitudes or different viewpoints. So it's your role here, as I mentioned before. You have to make sure, you have to encourage and facilitate, different. You have to welcome, different viewpoints that would enrich your data as well, and the explanations. So you have to ask questions in order to make sure if someone would hold like a different viewpoint or a different opinion. And if you notice this, within from the interaction, so you can draw out individuals that you feel like, they are different, or they might have like different viewpoint. So people like, sometimes, if there is kind of a mainstream, and people like feel like, they hold like a different viewpoint, so they refrain from expressing this or vocalizing, their viewpoint. So you can indicate, acceptability of different views or different viewpoints, in order to put people at ease, in order to get them to talk, or to express freely, their viewpoint, which is very important. This is the center or the backbone of your data collection, or that's needed for your research. And you have like a different strategy. You can test, bounds of the social norms by actually asking questions about, for example, like situations or conditions other views are acceptable. So instead of like facilitating or motivating them to express, their different views. So you actually ask about different, you ask about the situations and the conditions different views, would be adopted. So for example, if you need, like in Egypt here, how people perceive or actually treat, people with disability. So you start out, with some questions, on how the and of course, if the group actually they have this norm, the social norm about no, they are respectful. They hold some respect to people with disability, and the government actually investigate the government policies. In order to facilitate, some to offer, some enabling conditions for them, and then so they actually they all they all have the same viewpoint, but you want to make sure that other people they might hold different viewpoint or something, and then so you might encourage them about to ask about situations and conditions, like people might have or not disability, perhaps like the conception of otherness, in Egypt, for example, people like Christians or Copts, for example. So you see them all they adopt this tolerant approach, and they converge on this as a social norm, like tolerance as a social norm. And you want to make sure that they don't have other viewpoint. And you need to investigate, to what extent, they might agree on some discrimination or discriminatory policies against, Copts in Egypt. So you might ask about, situations and conditions when, this view or other views, disrespect, some sort of discrimination against, religious minorities are acceptable in their society. So by asking this, the people would step out of them of oneself in order to talk about in abstract term about the conditions and the political situations or social situations that would enable or facilitate these kind of discrimination against the religious minorities. Or you can play the role of the it's not like in reality this is not the case. So you might play the role of the devil's advocate. So you need to it's not by asserting what they said, and you might refer it to but some people say it's acceptable just to exclude the cops from this decision making process, or from particular decision making circles. So this way you need to have some questions in order to explore more, or in order to double check on the conformity to social norms, because if this is very important to your research. So that's all for this week, and next week we're going to continue with other two tools, and perhaps I can touch upon survey analysis or survey tool as well, because we're not going to talk about quantitative tool, because I needed the lab in order to give you a session, but I need to show you I showed you how to read a regression table, and for one important tool as well is the survey and survey analysis. So I can talk more about the survey as a tool to collect data and to use this data in your research. And then we will have two more next week lecture and two more, so we will have enough time to talk about philosophy of science and the triangulation and mixed methods thing, without focusing heavily on the quantitative analysis. Okay, that's all for this week, and see you next week. Bye.